So my name is Todd Coleman, and I am one of the founders of ArtCraft Entertainment. I'm also the creative director of Crowfall. A lot of people probably wonder how ArtCraft got started, and what they don't realize is this is actually my fourth startup. I've been doing this a long time. Most people get into the industry like they start in QA, or they start in customer support, or they start in community management or something like that, and they kind of work their way up the ranks, and I never did that. My method is to basically just start doing it and calling yourself a director, and if you do it long enough and loud enough, eventually people just kind of assume that somebody must have given you the right, and so they start following. And it's basically start a parade by marching and being very loud, see if you can get people to walk behind you. So back in college, I went to TCU up in Fort Worth, and my roommate at the time, Joseph Hall, and we were unique in that we were at this kind of fancy university, but we were both there entirely on loans and scholarships, so we never had any money. So we were always doing odd jobs and whatever we could do to try and basically scrape together enough money to come up with rent. So, at one point we were doing contracting for a medical software company. We both worked in the computer lab in one degree or another. We worked in the wiring department for the university. I was a night security guard at one point at a nearby apartment complex. We were basically just doing whatever we could to get by. We would start collecting crappy equipment from old dentist offices, because it's a dentist office, right? They always need to upgrade their computers. Basically, we would go and say, hey, you need to upgrade your computer. We'll upgrade your computers at cost. Like, we won't charge you for our labor. We'll help you buy the new machines, set up your new network, get the machines going, and all you have to do is give us your old machines, the ones you're going to throw out anyway. So then we would take those machines and we would sell them to other people on campus. Cheap, because effectively it was all time, which we had plenty of, and no cost to get this equipment because we got it from the dentist, and we would then sell them to people and make a couple $100. So the other thing we did as a hobby the whole time we were in college was we ran text-based MUDs. We actually ran them on the university servers, which you're not supposed to do, but we did it anyway. And so we would basically put together machines and sell them during the week, and then on the nights and weekends we would run this text-based game. It's basically a non-graphics version, not massively multiplayer version of an MMO. So it's like 60 or 100 people at the most, and they're all typing and texting to each other. And there was no graphics. Like, you'd walk up and say, the dragon hits you for 50 damage. Oh, crap, run away, So it was all text-based. But the basic concepts of online gaming are the same. It's just MMOs are way, way, way bigger in scale. So we're building a really interesting skill set, right? Joseph is a computer science major. I'm a business major with a minor in computer science. And we're hustling on the side, working with businesses to try and get equipment. And we're also learning about games at the same time. And those two skills end up being way more valuable coming out of college than the actual degrees that we got, or at least mine. My business degree was like, all right, business management. I'm sure that'll come in handy someday, and it did, but mostly what helped us get jobs coming out was all the information and all the skills we'd picked up selling those computers, dealing with people, and dealing with online gamers, right? Get out of college, get my first job is for a massive software company, a company called Dun & Bradstreet. It was mainframe-based software for large-scale data systems. So accounting systems, tax roll information going back 20 years. So if I want to look up and say, how much did John pay in taxes 15 years ago on his property, you have to go to this mainframe and get that data. Incredibly expensive, incredibly painful, incredibly boring. So I got a job as part of a strike team that would get sent to one of these organizations, and our job was to basically sift through 30 or 40 years worth of accounting information and pull out all the good stuff to get them off that mainframe. While we're on one of these sites, I have an idea to create a tool that would basically automate my job. We just automatically go through and pull out all those data records and move them over to the new system. So I go to my boss and I say, hey, I've got this idea for a tool. And my boss doesn't bite. He's like, no, I don't want you to make that. And I don't understand why. I'm like, why not? This would be awesome for our customers. Well, it turns out we were a consulting firm. So if I have a tool that automates my job, they can't send me out on site and bill for $100, $200 an hour. So they don't like the tool. They think the tool is a terrible idea because it will undercut their consulting business. So I go back, I'm still at the time living with my ex-college roommate who's still in school, And I tell him about this tool. It's Joseph. I tell him, hey, I got this really cool idea for a tool. And Joseph's like, yeah, it is really cool, but I don't even have money to finish going to college, so I don't really have time to talk about that right now. So I basically offered Joseph, because he was a computer science major, I offer him $1,000 to write that tool for me so I can use it on my job. So he writes the tool, and amazingly, it actually works. So I take the tool into my boss. I'm like, I wrote that tool and it works. And he's like, no, I don't want you to use it. Don't bring it in here. So I realized that I've got now a software tool that solves a giant problem that people are willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to fix. And I own it, like it's my tool, free and clear. So I go back to Joseph and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go start a company. I'm gonna quit my job, start a company using this tool. And we're gonna make a company out of this. And Joseph's like, I'm still in school. I got to finish my degree. I'm going to get married. I'm not in. I'm out. So I went and started that company. And that was my first, I worked 1 year from getting out of school. I worked for 1 year and I quit my software job on the 1 year anniversary of my start date. And I took that tool and I started my first company. So I think I was 23 years old. And that was my first, it was Reliant Data Systems, was my first database tools and technology company. I went looking for money. I'd never done any fundraising before. I was probably terrible at it. And I remember a buddy of mine talked to his grandmother and she said, I invest a little bit of money in your name every year. Why don't I this year, we'll make that the investment that I do for you. I'll invest in Todd's little company. So I got an investment of $20,000 from a friend, a family member of a friend. And at the time, that sounded like just an unbelievable sum of money to me. It was like, holy crap, I got $20,000 to start my company. Now, knowing what I know, for an individual, 20 grand is a lot of money. For a company, it's really not. Like, you can burn through $20,000 almost immediately when you include like salary and payroll and insurance and furniture and machines and stuff like that, and getting a website up. We burned through that money very, very quickly. My buddy's father was basically bitching about this investment to a friend of his and saying, yeah, Brian put his money in Todd's company and it's probably not going to go anywhere, and I'm sure he spent it all now. And that friend, out of respect for his privacy, I probably should name him, so we'll just call him Buck. So my buddy's dad talked to his friend Buck, who was an entrepreneur. And that guy said, Buck said, I tell you what, send the kid down to me and I'll have my guys grill him and make him feel real bad about taking the money. And whatever's left, I'll get him to give it back to you. So they call me and say, hey, there's an investor, there's an entrepreneur down in Houston who wants to meet with you. He wants to invest in your company. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm gonna get this thing going. I didn't know I was being set up. The whole thing was actually a meeting to try to get me to give the money back. So I went down to Houston to meet with Buck and his guys, and I got on a whiteboard and I explained, here's the problem I'm solving. Here's the job that I had and how we did it and how people are actually doing this. Here's how much money that cost. Here's how the tool works. I showed them the tool and they said, okay, great, give me a minute. And they escorted me out of the room and he had a meeting with his guys. And the guys turned to him and they were like, holy shit, the tool actually works. Like, this is a real thing. This is actually huge. We need to get in on this. So they brought me back in and he said, I tell you what, I'll invest $500,000 in your company, but you got to come here to Houston because that's where my other company is located. So I talked to Joseph again and I'm like, hey, I got some actual money. Look, we got, enough money to get started. And Joseph's still like, that's really risky and I'm not that interested. But another buddy named James, who I'd been gaming with since like middle school, who was very technically minded as well. And James was like, that sounds awesome actually. I'll move to Houston. So we both packed all of our stuff in a truck and we moved to Houston. So that initial money kind of got us up and running. It got the company off the ground. But then it wasn't enough to really gain any real traction. So the investor, Buck, as we're calling him, basically started looking for actual real investment. So we ended up raising $2.25 million with Austin Ventures. So now I'm 25. I'm really young, don't really know what I'm doing, but now we've got real engineers, so we're going through and we're building on that tool that my college roommate built for me for $1,000. And then I called Joseph back and I'm like, hey, dude, we got real money. Why don't you come join me? So then he came and joined the company. So now I'm working with Joseph again, which was great. And we ended up doing a second round, which was like $6 million. So now we've raised, I don't know how much it was, almost $9 million. So things started to go crosswise between the original investor, Buck, and our venture capitalist. Right there was a fracture in the core of that company that we were never going to really get over or around. At the same time, we made a lot of progress on building that tool set out. Like the tools was getting better and better, but we also weren't getting any sales. And so eventually we hit a point where we kind of burned through all the investment money, and our only real options were just, wrap it up, call it, didn't work, or go find somebody to acquire us. And as it turns out, there's a company up in Detroit, right outside of Detroit, called CompuWare Corporation, that had a massive customer base of mainframe companies. They gobbled us up, and that was pretty much the end of Reliant. And I've got a little bit of cash in my pocket from the acquisition, not a huge amount, but a sizable, sizable. At least when you're 28 and you don't have any kids, seems like a lot. If I'd have been smart, of course, I would have invested that for retirement. But I wasn't, because I was 28, and I'm thinking, oh, this is easy. All you do is come with an idea, and you raise a bunch of money, and then you sell it. How hard can that be? I'll just do that over and over and over. It's not that easy, actually. It was incredibly painful, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. But anyway, now I'm 28 years old, and I've got a little bit of cash.
So Joseph and James and I are talking about what we're going to do next.
And we decide the right answer is to take everything we've got and dump it into a game company. And that was Wolfpack Studios, and the game was Shadowbane.